A big replacement steps in, but can he make his mark? I'm Teekosey, and this is with just 15 defeats. Thanks for joining me for another round of With Just 15 Defeats. I'm Teekosey, and today I'm going to be talking you through the WBC Heavyweight title fight between the champion, Deontay Wilder, and the challenger, Gerald Washington. If you've got any comments on this fight, I need to hear from you ASAP, so jump down to the comments section, hit me up with your best comments. If you've got any problems with my predictions, my analysis, I want to hear from you. Let's start the debate and take it from there. I love hitting the comments section of my videos, so if you've got any comments, any predictions yourself, you know where to go. Now, if you get to the end of this video, which I hope you do, you're gonna hear my actual prediction for this fight, and that's your starting point for hitting me up on the comments section. Now, if you appreciate this video, you can do that by hitting the thumbs up button, leaving some comments, and also remember to click the subscribe button, because if you hit the subscribe button, you will get notifications of any new videos that I have coming up. And obviously, there's a lot of big fights coming up in the new year. With the Haye fight, we've got the Klitschko Joshua fight, we've got Ortiz, and we've got all these champions like Joseph Parker. But obviously, as time progresses, I'm going to be doing more and more videos of the bigger fights generally within boxing. And if you go to my channel, that's where you're going to find all the good stuff. I've already done the undercard fight of this Deontay Wilder defense, and that is Agono versus Dominic Brazil. A very interesting fight, and if you don't know anything about those two, you've come into this video primarily due to the Deontay Wilder, and you want to know a little bit about the undercard. Jump ahead to that video, go to my channel, and you'll find that, and you'll find a detailed breakdown and some predictions on that. So let's just move ahead to the Deontay Wilder versus Gerald Washington fight, which is obviously the main event, and it's for the WBC title. Now, this isn't the fight that we were expecting. It was originally announced that Deontay was going to be making this defense against a Polish ladder whose name I'm not going to try and pronounce, but he has a fairly decent record. But that fight seems to have disappeared, and they've been on the lookout for a replacement. A lot of guys have put their name into the ring, or their hat into the ring, to get this slot with Deontay, but we've ended up with Gerald Washington. Now, the other day I was looking at the WBC rankings just to see how we've ended up with Washington. Now, when I look at the WBC rankings, which I assume is the latest, the number one contender is Browne. Now, he was going to be fighting Povetkin at the end of last year for effectively the number one position, okay, to then fight Deontay Wilder, hypothetically. That fight never happened due to various drugs test failures that we had from both Povetkin and Browne, okay. Now, his name didn't ever seem to be bandied about from what I could see. Sorry. So, which is quite odd, because to me, he was the natural selection for this fight. I know Wilder's already fought him and beat him, but it was a good fight. He went the full distance, the only time Deontay's been the full distance. And I think a rematch would have been quite good. The fact that Browne had obviously been in a camp, training for Povetkin only 6 weeks ago, it should have made sense. It should have been the natural selection. Didn't happen. For my money, I don't think we're going to see much of Browne now. I think he will fade away. This was an opportunity for him. and I can't see him really making any noise moving forward. Now on the list you've got Luis Ortiz, you've got Kubrat Pulev. I think both of them, they're high profile, they're top contenders, and I don't think either of them would jump into a fight as a late replacement. It just doesn't sit with me. Then you've got Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte has been calling out Deontay. Again, I think he's positioned himself in this sort of position, and I think he will get a shot. I think he will get a shot at some point. I think if they're sensible, they will give him another top 20 guy next, and if he comes through that well, I think he could be on the verge of an actual title shot legitimately. Okay, you then got Annie Ruiz, who just fought recently. You Carlos Takam, who just fought recently. Yohan Duhaupas, who I think he might have been up for selection if he hadn't gone in late notice with Povetkin and then got annihilated in a stoppage. We then move forward to Gerald Washington. You've got Maris Wack, Rudenko, Brazil, who's fighting on the undercard. Okay, so I think this is how we get down to it, and they obviously wanted to keep this card. They wanted to find someone who was a relatively decent opposition. Washington steps up. That's kind of how we got there. As I say, a lot of people have kind of been excluded almost immediately. So let's just start talking about the two fighters as we like to do on with just 15 defeats, so we can make a little bit of analysis and comparison. Okay, so Deontay, 31 years old, he's 6'7", about 225 to 230 in weight. He's got a phenomenal record of 37-0 with 36 knockouts. He obviously, it's quite a substantial record without facing any of the top contenders. And part of the reason for that is because he has a fairly limited amateur career. He had a very short amateur career before turning professional, despite going to the Olympics. He had a short amateur career, managed to go to the Olympics, managed to medal, and then he turned pro immediately. And he's, like a lot of these guys, he's been learning on the job as he's gone up that way. So he's had to fight quite regularly at a lower level. But he's been savagely knocking out every single person he's fought, apart from Stavern. Now, in recent years, since turning, he won the championship against Stavern, and he's defended it against Molina, Duhaupas, Spilka, and Arreola. Now, none of these guys are people that are going to excite you. They're people that have been contenders, or they've kind of been there or thereabouts without really having success themselves. But they're known for durability. They offer some differences, and they're credible opponents without being stars or, as I say, top level contenders. Now, Deontay Wilder, one of the most interesting guys in the division, and he's a guy that I favour and I rate very, very highly, and I would highly recommend that you go to my channel and you check out my top 15 heavyweight boxers, the ranking system for January 2017. A lot of in-depth analysis on the whole division there. So check that out. Now, Deontay Wilder, he's big, he's rangy, he's quick, he's athletic, he's powerful, he's explosive. He throws combinations with serious power. He looks to knock out people, and that's why he has a record that delivers knockouts. Okay, he moves around the ring exceptionally well for a heavyweight. He's one of the few heavyweights that can move about relatively quickly and fluidly. Okay, now, as I say, he is a creative fighter who throws powerful combinations, and he really has a snap in his punch. Okay, the thing is, he does have some negatives. Like, no one is a Superman in the sport. No one has 10 out of 10 for every possible attribute, and Deontay Wilder is no different. Okay, now, one of the main problems with Deontay Wilder is he is wild by name and he is wild by nature. In the ring, exceptionally wild. I had this debate with someone who left a comment on one of my videos last week or the week before, and they were basically trying to say that I rate Deontay too highly because he does have weaknesses. And the fact is, yes, he does have weaknesses, and primarily he does leave himself exposed. And he leaves himself exposed because he throws wild combinations with full power. And because he does that, it puts him off balance, and it leaves him open for some counter-attacking. Now, obviously, at the moment, he hasn't really fought anyone of a seriously high level that can expose that. And it's potential that when he does fight someone at that top level, they will be able to expose that and hurt him. That's 100% possible. Now, the other issues we've got is that in the last fight, Deontay Wilder injured his hand quite seriously. I think he injured another. He came out of the fight with another injury. I think he had 2 quite serious injuries from the last fight, and I think that might be why the original opponent was chosen. It wasn't someone who was a devastating top guy, and they were hesitant in putting Wilder in with a top level guy, and that's why we had that opponent, and now we've got this change in opponent again. The other thing, this is not necessarily necessarily a negative in Wilder, but it's just a fact that we haven't seen him in the ring with a devastating puncher, someone known for knocking people out on a regular basis. So we really don't know to the extent how good his chin is. Really, we've seen him in some. He's had some good fights, good competitive fights with some of these guys, but we haven't seen him really take a meaty punch yet. So again, that's another thing that we need to consider. Now, when we look across to the other side of the ring, we've got Gerald Washington. Gerald Washington is someone who is somewhat unknown generally, mainly because, like a lot of these guys, he hasn't really had the exposure, and he hasn't really fought a number of the known opponents. Okay, now Gerald Washington's slightly older, 34 years old. I believe he was in the Navy or one of these divisions, and he obviously had a career in that before becoming a professional boxer. So he's 34 years old. He's about 6'6". He's about 240 in weight. So there are similarities in the size. I think when they come together in the ring, they're going to look fairly similar. Obviously, we know that Wilder he's fairly slim. He's fairly slim for a guy of his size. Washington's going to be more thickly set, but still in absolutely phenomenal shape. Okay, now he has a record of 18-0-1, so that's 18 victories and 1 draw, no defeats. He's got 12 KOs, I believe. And as I say, he doesn't have many names on his hit list. He's beaten Eddie Chambers, which isn't anything to really get excited about. He's a much smaller guy, and he's past his best, to put it bluntly. He's also got a draw with Amir, another guy who is an explosive puncher, and kind of a knockout specialist, slightly smaller as well. And the fact that he's ended up with a draw against that sort of opponent I think, unusual. Maybe paints a bit of a story about Gerald Washington. Okay, now Gerald Washington, there's somewhat of a similarity between him and Wilder, but the similarities do not include the bells and whistles that we get with Deontay Wilder, which is the wild and devastating punches. I think the kind of the nuts and bolts of the two are quite similar. They've got exactly the same kind of dimensions. They can box well. They can both move around the ring exceptionally well. They're both fairly agile. They're both fairly fluid. They're smooth movers. They've both got very good jabs. They've both got very big jabs. I think obviously the difference with Gerald Washington is that possibly somewhat more conservative. He hasn't shown that he's got devastating power. He hasn't really knocked many people out cleanly. And also what we've found is that in the fights that have gone more than a few rounds, he's lacked stamina. He's started to fade. Amir Mansour, he started very, very well, moving around the ring, very dominant jab, was winning rounds and then faded. And that's why we got this kind of crazy scorecard and end result in that fight. Same degree with the Chambers fight. He was dominant in that fight throughout, but faded. Now, he hasn't got that many rounds under his belt. He hasn't ever fought in a 12-rounder. The longest he's gone is 10 full rounds against Amir Mansour, which ended up in a draw. So it'll be interesting. Now, where this becomes somewhat interesting is that, as I say, Gerald Washington is a very conservative, somewhat defensive fighter, on the back foot, looking for openings. We discussed about Deontay Wilder's possible weaknesses, very, very wild and can be open. We have to ask ourselves, can Gerald Washington take advantage of that by counter-punching? The answer is yes, possibly. And the fact that he has such large dimensions, he has a big reach, it does favour him. It gives him the opportunity to do that more than possibly some of the other opponents that Deontay Wilder has faced. For me personally, I don't believe this. I think it could happen, but for me, my prediction on this fight is that we're going to get a late stoppage. We're going to get a late stoppage now. I think this fight is going to be a very interesting fight. It's a fight that I think is pretty good. I think it's a more interesting fight on paper and a more interesting fight in the ring than the original scheduled fight. And I think that because of the size of the two guys and the somewhat similarities that they have, I think it will go to the late rounds. But I just feel Deontay Wilder's sick power that he possesses, the more creative mind, will take over and will inflict damage upon Wilder. Now, it could be a coming out party for Washington where he picks off Wilder as and when, but for me, I don't think it's going to be the case. As I say, I think we're going to see Wilder get another stoppage, and I think we're going to see it fairly late on, possibly 10th or 11th. Now, the odds for this fight are a landslide victory to Wilder. The odds are 1-18 Wilder to win, whereas Gerald Washington's 8-1. So there's a swing of 24 there in favour of Deontay Wilder, the current champion. And as I say, this is an interesting fight. It's definitely one to watch. Now, as I said on my channel, I've got the video for the undercard fight, Ngannou versus Brazil. Again, another fight that could be interesting, depending on what guys show up. Could steal the show. So if you want to know anything about that fight, check out my channel, check out that video, click the subscribe button, and if you've got any comments on this fight, where do you think this fight is going to go, remember to go to the comments section, hit me up, and I'll get right back at you. I've been Teekosey. Good night.